everyone, it's Brady from Elite Weather Forecast, and today I'm going to be doing a video on cities most at risk for a hurricane. Given the season isn't really active yet, even though we had a quite early start, I figure it's best that, in case you're not aware, Tampa Bay, the city I'm going to be doing, is quite at risk, and I'm going to be doing other cities too that are at risk because people should know in case they don't. Places like New Orleans and Houston, I'll probably do videos on them as well. Those cities are really at risk for hurricanes, and we've seen it before. Some may be too young to understand. You've just heard of Katrina. Others weren't following Harvey that close. Maybe even you were too young then. But those were two major natural disasters that are the only ones, both $100+ billion. And say a Category 3 were to roll up through Tampa Bay, that could be another $100+ billion disaster. In this case, what if a CAT5, a strong CAT5, hit Tampa Bay? That's what we're going to be covering today. And it's the Hurricane Phoenix Project, or Project Phoenix, in other words, that was created by the Tampa Bay City Council planning offices, and they created this hurricane that had Cat 5 180-mile-per-hour impacts, just dropping into Tampa Bay. It would be a very unprecedented event, and they did simulations all throughout. They created forecast advisory cones. They created just really in-depth stuff. National Weather Service key messages. They went really in depth here. National Hurricane Centers. Word for word almost in some scenarios. And again, let me remind you, they created this back in over 10 years ago. So a little bit has changed since then as sea levels continue to rise and elevation doesn't. So that's continuing to be concerning. That over a 10-year span, that sea levels have definitely continued to rise over places like Tampa, New Orleans, which is already underwater, and Houston. Places like that along the Gulf Coast. Another place like Gulfport, or they're really at risk, and we've seen that before. And continue to advance through some of the advisory cones here. I mean, these are pretty impressive in-depth cones that they created. And here was a peak surge forecast that they even created too. I mean, if you can read that number says up to 33 feet at that max there. So there's no question this would be an extraordinarily intense event. I'm assuming that this has a large wind field too. It's a very large storm because we saw Dorian. Yes, it was incredibly impactful. Yes, it brought Cat 5 storm surge 18 to 23 feet to the Bahamas was forecasted, but it wasn't a large Cat 5 by no means. It definitely grew in size when it underwent its wall replacement cycle off the coast of Florida, but that doesn't mean it was a large Cat 5. It could have been, believe it or not, it could have been worse for the Bahamas, which is hard for some people to hear, but had it been a large storm, it could have been worse, but it wouldn't have brought 185-mile-an-hour winds. It needed that smaller size to be able to intensify so quickly, and smaller storms can intensify more quickly, which really helps them gain in strength. And that's what makes Katrina so incredible, to have the size it did and be able to increase into a Category 5 hurricane at 175 miles per hour is just unreal, and it's ridiculous. And once in a generation it could be for some people. So here's the wind speed. When you first look into this, you're right. Okay, well, expecting gusts like this to happen from a strong Cat 5. No, these aren't gusts. These are sustained winds, which I just find unbelievable. And in reality, unlike the simulation, I mean, Yes, it has 185 mile per hour sustained winds in the forecast advisory, but it's very rare you ever find sustained winds actually get up to what you found the hurricane, unless it's strengthened. Unless it's strengthened, of course, that's always one thing. But I mean, these are, what is it, take off 5 miles per hour. That's not going to change anything once you get the CAT5 strength. Complete and total devastation. Once you get 160 plus miles per hour, it doesn't change at all, really. Uh, when you get more inland, that's when you see more impacts. Like you see those 100 plus mile per hour gusts well inland. I mean, that's more impressive, right? That's what makes it more concerning, especially when you see a Cat 5 landfall like this. And I'll try to go through quicker here, but I just want you all to have the best understanding of it as possible. Um, and here you can see buildings, damage, destruction of buildings. Nearly 500,000 buildings destroyed. That's this is remarkable. Yeah, I get this is a simulation, but this is something that could very well really happen with global warming and everything that we've seen happen, continue to happen, weather-wise, that we never thought was possible. 60 inches of rain. Is that's not possible? Well, it turns out it is. Because when the next time, when 70 inches happens, whether it's 100 years from now, next year, or 1,000 years from now, it will happen again. This will happen. Tampa will get struck by a hurricane at some point. It's inevitable. So you can say this will never happen, but Tampa at some point will get struck by a Category 5 hurricane. And, obviously the question of when, if it's our generation, the later it happens, the worse it's going to get because of sea levels rising. Until there's a fix, it's going to get worse. It's not like the water just goes away too, right? It's the ocean. So, I mean, these are just some incredible stats. Here's a zoomed in, better view, which I probably should have used this picture only, but whatever. I mean, there's 1.6 million, nearly 1.6 million in this now 9-county region across Florida, and you can see that 1.2 million buildings nearly are damaged, and that's just incredible. Whether it's just some shingles falling off, or it's uh, pieces pieces of a building flying off, or it's complete destruction. Over 1.2 million buildings damaged, and we can see here the storm surge impact. That's remarkable. Nearly 100,000 buildings incredibly damaged or destroyed from just the storm surge alone, not including the wind, which is an incredible stat they were able to pull. This was really a cool thing for me to look at. I've heard of it before. I think I've even read it pretty in depth, and I've always had this in mind that Tampa is at risk. Tampa's at risk, but I had to go in. Why is Tampa at risk? Get it? Elevation, sea level elevation is rising, but what else? What makes Tampa so special to be prone to such a damaging storm, right? So that's kind of what I went through here. And medical facilities here are now loss of use, right? That means no longer functioning as a hospital, right? And I mean, you go into Polk and Citrus and Hernando counties, even to East Pasco. I mean, these are potentially up to three to 6 months in some places, in some of these counties. And then you go just towards Tampa, and that's just, I mean, 9 to plus 12 months is, and I mean, 9 to 12 plus months is ridiculous. I mean, over a year, hospitals aren't functioning, patients aren't able to get there, right? Imagine you have all these people after the storm that you need to get to a hospital in the area, and you can't because they're destroyed, right? They're flattened, the buildings. That's just, it's mind-boggling to think of the situation that would happen. And maybe a 180 mile per hour hurricane doesn't hit Tampa in the near future, right? But who's to say a 130 mile per hour hurricane is not going to hit Tampa in the next 10 years? Who says it's not going to happen this year, right? It could happen this year. If a Category 2 hurricane were to hit Tampa Bay, it would be devastating. Okay, I'm not saying it would be Katrina, but it would be remarkably devastating for the Tampa Bay. With this track, it would be devastating. It would be very devastating. Okay, a track within about 10 miles of this right here would be absolutely devastating. Okay, again, I'd say even closer, within 10 miles, probably within, I'd say 5 to 8 miles even. Shorten it down, because you go, the farther north you go, that gives more opportunity for storm surge. The farther south you go, it gives less opportunity. See how the right front quadrant here, I'll show you, the track here is just able to push this water right into here, and it's allowing places like here, right, counterclockwise fashion this hurricane works in, right, to just push water into these places like that. So boom, flooded, right? And just those places just really getting damaged to show the storm surge. And I'm not going to tap into storm surge on this slide a little bit more, but rather the maximum winds. Talk about Tampa International, 180 mile per hour sustained winds, along with St. Pete is again, it's hard to wrap your mind around something like this happening. You have to remember it's a simulation. It's not real life. It's not happening right now. But it's something that Tampa needs to be prepared for. Any hurricane that comes, the tropical system, Tampa always sees some legit storm surge flooding, right? So this makes me very concerned for that area. And Sarasota, seeing CAT5 sustained winds too is pretty intense as well. Here's a number of customers without power. 3+ days, over 1 million customers without power across this 9-county region in Florida. 90+% in about 5 counties, if I count that right. 100% in Pinellas is incredible. It's kind of stunning. I've read this before too, but it's still stunning to think about. Number of customers without power for, again, the customers, not people, right? Multiply it by 3 or 4, and you got 3 to 4+ million people without power, not just customers, right? And number of customers without power for 1 to 2 months plus is nearly, did I got this right? Nearly 500,000. 500,000. Wow. To make sure that was right, it's pretty close to the number of buildings completely destroyed. So you can imagine there's probably some correlation there. And affected population, and with connected to direct casualties, this would be more than Katrina. This would be 2,000 plus casualties. In case you can't see the number on the right, it's just about 200 people post-storm casualties. So it's to think that 21+ hundred people would die from an event like this is saddening. But again, I'm not trying to darken your day here, but I'm just trying to alert you of the effects and what this would be like, because we've seen firsthand CAT5 storms, or what were once CAT5 storms, make huge impacts in U.S. territories, in the U.S. itself, and they just devastate, right? It's a devastating event, remarkable, fascinating to watch unfold, right? The damage is fascinating, but it's saddening at the same time, and people need to be aware. When people see a CAT2 hurricane rolling up in towards the Tampa, and they see that forecast going over them, they need to get out of town because of this, and to avoid the casualties. People need to evacuate. There's a reason those evacuations happen, and you just need to follow them. I could go way more off track than I already am, but try and keep it towards the story that I'm trying to show you here. And here's the economic losses here. Pretty devastating. Just read that for yourself, and I'll show you the next slide. Economic losses here again. case you can't read that perfectly, on the right, you're in trouble counting how many zeros that is. Yes, that is 233 billion plus dollars. And this was as 2010 with inflation a little bit too. Imagine that's a little bit higher now, not a huge difference, but a little bit. You gotta imagine around 235 plus billion dollars in damage. Yeah. And with sea levels continuing to rise, that extra maybe half foot or whatever, maybe 3 to 6 inches of water, it's a big difference. And economically, imagine 3 to 6 inches of water and going up to one house where they didn't have any water, right? The economic impact on that. So that's just something to think about there. And 230 plus billion dollars, regardless of damage, it would be the most on record, and just fairly incredible. So here's some more in-depth data here on the storm's past trek. So until it makes landfall, you can tell when it makes landfall when it goes up to 933 millibars. It never gets lower than 918 millibar. So the good thing is the storm surge could be worse. Just not good to think about. If this was a lower pressure, I can't imagine 180 mile per hour CAT5 would be at 918 millibars. That'd be a pretty weak 185 mile per hour CAT5 central pressure. Regardless, that would be devastating storm surge. But still, right, you see it develop, get from a CAT1 strength at 70 knots at 80 miles per hour, get to 80 knots, right, some slow development happening, and then undergoes, it does eventually undergo near rapid intensification. Does it ever? Do the math here. Yeah, it does. Okay, 30 knots. Yep, it does. So it does go under rapid intensification, not necessarily incredible rapid intensification, but it does go undergo rapid intensification, as all major storms do. I think that is representing more of a simulation rather than what would happen. I don't think we'd see an 180 mile per hour cat storm just meet the bare minimum for rapid intensification. I'm pretty sure we would see, something pretty quick rapid intensification happen, something like 45, 50 miles per hour in a 24-hour span. We would see something with 180 mile per hour CAT5 in the Gulf. I'm pretty sure something like that. Along those lines, here's peak surge potential up to 26 feet in Tampa Bay, right? And this is just some more important locations they're showing here, right? Some go farther inland, but up to 23 feet in Oldsmar to 24 feet at Apollo Beach, right? And there are some places that aren't listed here that would likely be at around 30 plus feet. So wrap your head around that. Katrina was 28 feet. Yeah, exactly. So you'd see some wind impacts here. 160 plus mile per hour wind gusts with the eye wall. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, that's just quite incredible to think about there. I wouldn't want that to happen. Rainfall here, 10 to 20 inches, big rainfall event, right? You get into that eye wall. People think when you get into that eye wall, there's some incredible winds, right? Those are your most intense winds. But the eye wall brings that really heavy flooding, right? Radar depicts it, right? Usually in the orange DBZs, right? But those tropical downpours, they come down really, really fast, right? Just like a severe thunderstorm would, right? All of a sudden, boom, you see a half inch in about 10 to 15 minutes, right? Kind of imagine that, but it's gonna last for hours, right? So you just quickly rack up, 1 to 3 inch per hour rainfall rates in that eye wall for sometimes just a half hour if it's a quick moving hurricane, but other times it can be 2, 3, 4, 5, plus hours if it's a slow moving hurricane. So because there's the backside of that eye wall too, you have to remember. And here's elevation of Tampa, 20 feet. Not not very high, just to show you how low of an elevation they are. They're not below sea level like New Orleans, but they are pretty low. You look on Wikipedia, you'll see 48 feet. It's probably a little bit farther inland, but also don't always trust Wikipedia. And here is fishing app, nauticalcharts.com, I believe is the name of the website. And I went in depth to show you some oceans. Not to be show a pun here, but literally the ocean depths. As they go, let me rephrase that. Okay, here, these are the ocean depths, right? 12,000 feet. Those, you see that right? Those are not like, this is not near the coastline, but this is just about as deep as the Gulf of Mexico goes. You can see down the south, that's the Yucatan Peninsula. Okay, so just for reference here, 12,000 feet, just about as deep as it goes. You can see here, and then you move further east. Here you can see as you go farther north, you have 4,000 foot depths, and then you move further east. You can see the barrier here off the coast of Florida, how it just dips, right? You can go see how it goes from 9,000 to 3,000, just like that, right? So pretty incredible. Even to 480 feet, right? From 9,000 to 500 feet. Quite intense drop up there with the barrier off the coast. And to show shallow water here, right? Very shallow water, and it continues to move. As we continue to move further east here, you can just continue to see Florida. The lower that sea level gets, the lower the ocean depths are, the closer to the coast. And as it always is, right? These are some pretty remarkably low depths, right? And the water just continues to push all, right? So shallow, right? So it'll continue to push all that water up, with the hurricane, right? And it can just push it until it gets onto land, right? So that's what you got to remember about those shallow waters. It's going to bring that water with it onto land, these pretty devastating hurricanes. And some of you may know these areas better than I do, but you can tell this is the Tampa Bay area now, and just sea levels anywhere ranging from almost zero, from zero, the depths to around 10 feet. So pretty, and getting a little bit higher in some places. The farther south you go here, but still some impressively low numbers there, and it continues to show some different locations by Long Branch, Florida. Again, this is all around the St. Pete, Tampa Bay area. So some of you may know these areas better than I do, of course, but this is just to show some of the areas that are really at risk for storm surge flooding. For sure, and storm surge flooding is definitely, it's the most dangerous part of a hurricane all times. That and the rain. The flooding is always the most concerning part. It's not the wind, right? The wind is extremely concerning, obviously, and that's what people think. That's how our scale's measured, even for hurricanes, right? And I don't think they'll ever change it, but I wouldn't be mad ever if they decide to change how the hurricane scale went, and based on damage from storm surge combined with all the rainfall, if they decided to change the scale. I like how it works now, and I don't think a lot of people will be able to buy into it, because the wind speed's much more exciting and easier to follow. We have a system that works now, but there are just some devastating Category 1, Category 2 hurricanes, devastating tropical storms that just devastate people more than some CAT3 plus hurricanes, right? So that's just something to think about, I guess, for thought. Some more in-depth areas you can see here, McKay Bay, just really shallow, right? And the water continues to just get pushed up here, right? You can see the difference. Water continues to get shallow, right? All shallow, right? So the hurricane's able to push this water up with it, right? And just push it, right? And right into the Tampa Bay and St. Pete area and south of it, right? So, I mean, I just wanted to give you some visual of what the Tampa sea levels look like, right? Why they're so at risk, and that's pretty much. Well, play it. Go back to the beginning. I guess we'll leave it there. Why they're so much at risk, right? And remarkable, to think about here. As I'll just go to this slide because it's pretty entertaining to watch the county map with winds, but this would be devastating. This would be absolutely devastating, and there's no question about it. And the people of Tampa need to be prepared, not for the CAT5, but for the CAT1, right? A direct CAT1 hit. Imagine, a hurricane brewing up, right? And the shallow waters tend to usually cause hurricanes to weaken as well. There are some cases of the opposite, but there's just too many other driving factors to prevent it from weakening. But here, see just an incredibly impactful hurricane damaging it. And I'm 90% sure those are sustained winds still, which is incredible to wrap your head around. It's just incredible. Just really, really incredible to think about. And, the Cat 1, again, as I was saying, the Cat 1 hurricane could be really, really dreadful, even for Tampa. It could, imagine one that was once a Cat 3 is now a Cat 1, right? It was a major hurricane, say at 120 miles an hour, right? And it comes to as let's say a 90 mile per hour Cat 1 hurricane instead, right? Say the pressure was a 950 millibars, right? That's going to continue unless it hits landfall, right? The water goes up, it doesn't go out, and that's something we have to remember with a storm like Katrina, how impactful that storm surge was, right? Who's to say that 10 feet of storm surge isn't going to happen in Tampa Bay here, and that would be very devastating. I imagine we'd see a 25 plus $billion event happen just from a Cat 1 that used to be stronger, right? So that's something to think about here. I hope I gave you a little insight on why Tampa Bay is so at risk, just incredibly at risk, and so hurricane prone. And well, the whole Gulf is hurricane prone, but this region is set up just terribly for storm surge. So I hope you learned a little bit today. If you didn't know about this already, you can look it up for yourself, Project Phoenix. Just search it up. It will come right up. Hurricane Phoenix, Tampa Bay. And you can learn more about it if you want. It was really cool to watch. I didn't put all the slides in there from Hurricane Phoenix, so if you want to go in depth more and look at some of that information, it was pretty cool to look at. Actually, like the simulation of a hurricane happening and watching it happen day by day. Very interesting. So that will be it. I will hopefully be doing a video soon, and that will be it for me.